Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
What do you think of when you hear the word Vietnam? For many people, the first thing is a war. But the story of Vietnam is much older and more complex than that. Its history is not one simple story, but many different stories joined together. This book will tell you about this long and interesting past. Vietnam is a country at a crossroads. This means it is a place where many powerful empires and cultures from different parts of Asia have met. Because of its location, its history is full of incredible change. It is a story of a country that was often divided into different parts. It is also a story of colonization, when other countries came to rule the land and its people. This history shows how the Vietnamese people have lived through these difficult times. They are a resilient people, which means they are strong and can recover from many problems. We will explore the many different Vietnams that have existed. This story covers more than 2,000 years of division, new beginnings, and survival. 2. Early times. The story of Vietnam begins a long time ago in the Red River Delta. This is a large area of land in the north of the country. An ancient group of people from the Dong Son culture lived here. They were very good at making things from bronze, like their famous large drums. Then, for 1,000 years, the powerful Chinese Empire ruled the region. China wanted the area because it was good for farming, and it was also an important place for trade, with ships from many countries coming to buy and sell valuable things. This long period of Chinese control brought many changes. The Vietnamese people learned about new technology and new ideas. They started using Chinese writing, and many Chinese people moved south to live in the area. But many Vietnamese people did not want another country to control them. They wanted to be free. Over the centuries, there were many fights against Chinese rule. These fights are called rebellions. One of the most famous rebellions was led by two brave women. They were known as the Trung sisters. They were local leaders, and their fight started after the Chinese rulers became too strict. In the year 39, they led a large army and pushed the Chinese out. Even though they lost in the end, the Trung sisters became important symbols for future generations. They showed that the Vietnamese people would always fight for their independence. The chance for freedom finally came in the 10th century. The powerful Chinese government was having many problems at home and was becoming weak. A smart and strong Vietnamese general named Ngo Quyen saw this as an opportunity. In the year 939, he organized his soldiers for a very important battle on a river. He fought and won against a Chinese naval fleet. This famous victory was the end of the long period of Chinese rule. Ngo Quyen secured independence for his people. After winning freedom, a new country was born. It was called Dai Viet, which means Greater Viet. The leaders of Dai Viet had the difficult job of building this new nation. They needed to create a strong government and a new culture that was uniquely Vietnamese. They did this by mixing local traditions with new ideas. They used some government structures from China because they were effective for running a country. At the same time, they honored their own culture. For example, Buddhism was already a popular religion for ordinary people. The new leaders made Buddhism an official religion of the state and helped build many pagodas. In this way, they built a country that felt new and strong, but also truly Vietnamese. 3. A divided country. After Vietnam became independent, the country was not always united. There were new problems inside the country. In the 16th century, Vietnam split into two parts. This was because two powerful military families, the Trinh and the Nguyen, could not agree. They decided to divide the country to avoid a big war between them. For more than 200 years, Vietnam had two rulers. The Trinh lords ruled the north from the old capital, Hanoi. The Nguyen lords ruled the south from their new capital, Hue. The south was very different from the north. It was a new frontier, an area with new land and opportunities. Many people went south to build new lives. These settlers were soldiers, farmers, and traders. The South became a place with many different cultures. Besides the Viet people, there were also Cham, Khmer, and many Chinese people who came to live and work there. The port of Hoi An became a busy center for trade with other countries. This division between the North and the South lasted for a long time. But in 1771, everything changed. A huge rebellion started, called the Tay Son Rebellion. It was led by three brothers. They were successful because many normal people were unhappy with high taxes and corrupt leaders. The Tay Son army was strong. First, they took control of the south. Then they marched north and defeated the Trinh lords. For a short time, they reunited Vietnam under their rule. However, the Tay Son victory did not last. A prince from the southern Nguyen family, Nguyen An, escaped the fighting. He slowly and carefully rebuilt his army. He made friends with different groups, including French advisors, to help him. After a long civil war that lasted for 30 years, Nguyen An finally defeated the Tay Son. In 1802, he became Emperor Gia Long. He created a unified Vietnam that stretched from the border with China to the Gulf of Thailand. This was the first time the country had the famous S shape we know today. But this new, unified country would soon face a serious new threat from Europe. 4. French control. In the middle of the 1800s, leaders in France wanted to build a new empire. They saw Vietnam as a good place to start in Asia. Vietnam had natural resources like rubber, and it was a good market to sell French products. France also said it wanted to protect Catholic missionaries who were working in Vietnam. The French military arrived in 1858. Their warships attacked the city of Da Nang on the coast. In 1859, they captured the important southern city of Saigon. The Vietnamese emperor's army fought back, but the French army was much stronger and had better weapons. After a few years of fighting, the emperor had to sign a treaty. He gave 3 areas in the south to France. Slowly, over the next 20 years, France took control of the rest of the country. France organized its new territory. It divided Vietnam into 3 separate parts. The south was called Cochinchina and had direct French rule. The center, called Annam, and the north, called Tonkin, were protectorates. This meant the Vietnamese emperor could keep his title, but the French made all the important decisions. France then combined these 3 Vietnamese regions with Cambodia and Laos. This new union was called French Indochina, and it was controlled from Paris. The French changed life in Vietnam. They built modern things like roads, canals, and railways to move goods more easily. They remade Saigon into a beautiful French-style city. To pay for these projects, they made Vietnamese people pay high taxes. They also controlled the sale of important products like salt and alcohol. The economy was completely changed to serve France. In the south, the French created huge rice farms for export. In other areas, they started large rubber plantations. This made French companies and a small group of rich Vietnamese landowners very wealthy. But for most Vietnamese people, life became harder. Many lost their land and became poor workers on the plantations. Conditions were terrible and the pay was low. French control created a new and unequal society, which would lead to many years of struggle. 5. A new politics. The French control of Vietnam created new ideas about politics. Many Vietnamese people were not happy with French rule and wanted change. But they had different ideas about how to make their country free. At first, there were 2 important leaders with different plans. One leader was Phan Boi Chau. He believed that Vietnam must fight the French to win independence. He looked to Japan for ideas and help. He started a movement to send young Vietnamese students to Japan to study. He hoped they would learn how to make Vietnam strong and modern so they could fight the French. Another important leader was Phan Chu Trinh. He had a different idea. He did not want to fight. He hoped that France would help Vietnam change. He thought Vietnam's old system with an emperor was a problem. He wanted a modern country with new laws and more freedom for people. He wrote a letter to the French leader in Vietnam and asked for these changes. He believed the French could help make Vietnam better. But these plans for peaceful change did not work. The French did not make the big changes that Phan Chu Trinh wanted. Many Vietnamese people, especially the young, started to lose hope. They did not believe that working with the French was possible anymore. They felt that peaceful change had failed and that they needed to try something different. This new generation of people wanted bigger and faster changes. New political groups, or parties, began to form. These groups were more radical. They did not want to ask the French for help. They wanted to take power for themselves. One of these groups was the Vietnamese Nationalist Party. They tried to start a fight against the French in 1930, but they failed. The most successful and organized group was the Indochinese Communist Party. It was started in 1930 by a young man named Nguyen Ai Quoc. Later, the world would know him as Ho Chi Minh. He traveled the world and learned about new political ideas. He believed that Vietnam needed a revolution. For him, a revolution was the only way to get true independence from France. He also wanted to change Vietnamese society to help poor farmers and workers have better lives. 6. The First Big War. The Second World War in Europe completely changed the situation in Vietnam. In 1940, France lost to Germany. This made the French government weak. Japan was an ally of Germany and saw an opportunity in Southeast Asia. Japanese soldiers moved into Vietnam. For a few years, the French colonial administration continued to work, but Japan held the real military power. This was a very important moment. Vietnamese people saw that a European power could be weak. The idea of French strength was broken. In early 1945, with the war ending, Japan suddenly removed the French administration and took full control. But just a few months later, in August 1945, Japan surrendered to the Allies. This created a power vacuum in Vietnam. There was no one in charge. Ho Chi Minh's nationalist group, the Viet Minh, was ready. They immediately launched the August Revolution. They took control of Hanoi and other important cities with very little fighting. On September 2, 1945, in a large square in Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh declared Vietnam's independence. He announced the creation of the Democratic Republic of Vietnam. But France did not want to lose its valuable colony. After the war, the French government was determined to restore the French Empire. The Allied powers decided that British forces would take the Japanese surrender in the south, and Chinese forces would do it in the north. In the south, the British helped the French return to power. French soldiers arrived and started fighting to retake the country. In the north, Ho Chi Minh tried to negotiate with the French for a peaceful solution, but they could not agree. The French were not willing to give full independence. In December 1946, the fighting exploded into a full-scale conflict. The First Indochina War had begun. The war was terrible and lasted for 8 years. It was a fight for control of the country, village by village. The Viet Minh used guerrilla tactics and had strong support from the peasants in the countryside. The war changed when it became part of the Cold War. Communist China began sending weapons to the Viet Minh. In response, the United States started sending a lot of money to help the French. The war reached its end in 1954 at the Battle of Dien Bien Phu. The French built a strong military base in a valley, believing they were safe. But the Viet Minh Army, under General Vo Nguyen Giap, did the impossible. They carried heavy cannons through mountains and jungles to surround the base. After a 56-day siege, the Vietnamese forces won a shocking victory. This great defeat forced the French to leave Vietnam forever. 7. The Second Big War. The peace after the First War did not last long. A meeting in Geneva in 1954 divided Vietnam. It became two parts. This division was meant to be for a short time. In the north, the government was communist, led by Ho Chi Minh. In the south, the government was anti-communist. The United States supported this government in the south. The plan was to have an election in 1956 to make Vietnam one country again. But the leader of South Vietnam, Ngo Dinh Diem, said no to the election. The United States agreed with his decision. Because there was no election, a new war began. The war started slowly in the South. Fighters who were against Diem's government began to attack. North Vietnam sent these fighters help and supplies. The United States sent more help to South Vietnam. They gave money, military equipment, and soldiers called advisors to help the South's army. But the fighting did not stop. It became bigger and more violent. The government in the South was not strong. It had many problems, and leaders changed often. After Diem was killed in 1963, the country was very unstable. The United States was afraid that South Vietnam would lose the war. In 1965, the American president decided to send combat soldiers to Vietnam. This was the start of what many people call the American War, or the Second Indochina War. The United States had a very powerful army. They used planes to drop bombs on North Vietnam and on paths in Laos and Cambodia. In South Vietnam, American soldiers went on missions to find and kill enemy fighters. This was a new kind of war. It was fought in jungles and villages, not just on battlefields. The war was terrible and destroyed large parts of the country. Millions of Vietnamese people died in the war. Many more had to leave their homes. The fighting was very difficult for American soldiers, too. In 1968, the Communists made a big surprise attack on cities all over South Vietnam during the Tet holiday. This Tet offensive showed people in America that the war was not almost over. Many Americans started to think the war was a mistake and wanted it to end. The government started to look for a way to find peace. Peace talks began in Paris, France. After a long time, an agreement was signed in 1973. It was called the Paris Peace Accords. American soldiers left Vietnam. But the agreement did not bring real peace to the country. The North and South Vietnamese armies continued to fight. 2 years later, the North launched a big final attack. The Army of South Vietnam could not stop them. On April 30th, 1975, tanks from the North entered Saigon, the capital of the South. The long and terrible war was finally over. 8. Vietnam today. After the war ended in 1975, Vietnam was unified under a communist government. But the country faced terrible problems. The economy was broken from years of war. The new government quickly took control of the South. They sent hundreds of thousands of people from the old Southern government to special camps for re-education. They also took over private businesses. This new socialist economy failed. Soon there was not enough food, and many people were very poor. The situation became worse when Vietnam fought new wars. In 1978, it invaded Cambodia. Then, in 1979, China attacked northern Vietnam. Because of the poverty and wars, hundreds of thousands of Vietnamese people fled the country on small boats. By 1986, the government knew it needed a major change. It began a policy called Doi Moi, which means renovation. This new plan opened Vietnam's economy to the world. It allowed private businesses and welcomed foreign investment. The change was huge. The economy started to grow very quickly, and Vietnam became a dynamic country. Millions of people were lifted out of poverty. Vietnam also improved its relationships with other countries. It joined ASEAN and even started friendly relations with the United States in 1995. Today, Vietnam is a busy, modern country with a growing middle class. But while the economy is open, politics is not. The Communist Party still holds all political power. Vietnam continues to balance its fast-growing economy with its single-party government.
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world. Thank you.